just be genuine, be authentic. Don't try to be a salesperson when you're not a salesperson. And if you are a salesperson, definitely don't be a salesperson.
Hey, Kristen. So glad you have power back on. For those of you who don't know, Kristen's based out of Dallas. It's been a crazy week for everyone, and I think we'll kick off talking about that and what that means for travel and how people are handling it. So, how are you doing, Kristen? Happy to have power?
Power, we have electric, we have hot water. Our pipes are still pipes, nothing's busted. We did get some things that froze over,
Yeah.
but we're not flooded. I mean, there are so many things that could have gone wrong for us that didn't go wrong for us. So I have nothing to complain about. We got a little dose of cold. So, the impact to Texas, I think, is a hot topic, mostly because we're unprepared for the most part. I mean, Texas is usually where the snowbirds head to
Right.
from the winter weather, but it's becoming such a different issue for a lot of states. Regardless of whether it's energy resources or natural gas resources or just weather conditions, road conditions in general. Um, there's a much bigger. It started with Texas this week, but it's been a much bigger impact
No,
across.
definitely. And we're hoping that all of you out there on the East Coast and the Southeast are safe and warm and have the resources you need. What's really interesting, though, I think, of course, we're still in COVID, we're still dealing with the pandemic. But then when you layer the weather issue on top of it, you see even more destinations and communities coming together where it really takes a village. And I love seeing that that's continuing and continuing to hold each other up during this time, but also the winter season is, not over yet. We're going to have right after winter season, then we're going to have tornado season, and then we're going to have hurricane season. So the weather issues are going to be like they always are.
Yeah, I think it's been really it's been a much bigger issue. I think this winter season, obviously, we've just had record
Mhm.
setting temperatures, low temperatures in a lot of states, but also because of the surge in road trip travel, people getting on the roads to take their trips versus flying and other means of transportation. It has impacted travel in a lot of ways.
It has. And with the Arrivalist does a great dashboard about what's going on in the overall country. And even though the heaviest winter storms have happened in Texas and to the east, basically road trip travel is kind of frozen for everyone until we thaw out and get to the next step. So even that trend of road trip travel, people are planning more, can't go right now. And so that will probably bust like a dam in March, hopefully.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're on the cusp of spring break travel, and I think from the latest trends for the U.S., spring break peak weeks are the second and third week this year
Yeah.
for both colleges, universities, and the public school system. And this is nationwide, so this is looking at all school systems in general. So, given that, and that is, I think, a little bit more, I think that's unusually early in the season.
Hmm.
Recent years, it's been more so the
The latter
third
part of March and April.
part of March and goes further into April. I think this year it's only going through April 12th is what they're saying that spring
Yeah.
break. So it's earlier in the year. And we have sort of a late, I know in Texas, this is a very late start to winter season. So I think those two things colliding
Mhm.
this late in February, or it's going to truly impact spring break travel. But what I will say is that on a lot of the groups and a lot of on the consumer side of chatter happening in social media and whatnot, everyone's looking for that destination to head to immediately following roads clearing, things thawing out, things like that. And Florida's up there on that list. You're seeing a lot of where do I go in Florida? I want to, I don't want to go where everyone's going because there's going to be like a migrate.
Crowd. Yeah.
But what are the sleepy towns? What are the beach towns? What are the small, like unknowns, uncrowded? So those are starting to come. It's kind of like a 2.0 of strategy from on the COVID side, but for a different reason. You know, like you mentioned earlier, it takes a village, and we've gotten that trial run of working within the destination with partners and stakeholders, local restaurants, hotels. We've gotten that rhythm down. So it's about finding and reapplying it to this winter weather disaster in some states, and into spring break.
Yeah, it really is. And I know I was talking to, we have clients in Florida, of course, and talking to them, and they're like, everybody hates us right now because it's so nice, but actually everybody's just wanting to be there. But the small destination, I love that that is also coming out of this, because when we talked about pent up travel before, one of our worries are to be cognizant about is people coming out of COVID are thinking more bucket list destinations. But because of more of a micro situation that's happened, with the weather, now they're looking at uncrowded, maybe not bucket list, but more like unique to them.
Absolutely. And I still feel like people's bucket list destinations have shifted. I feel like the natural, your bucket list places that you might have thought about years ago being your international trips, your, just got to do this one thing, before I kick the bucket type thing has
Yeah,
changed.
it's still not possible for a lot of people, and that's changed.
I mean, our bucket, there's so many now, it's a redefined bucket list. It's, your uncrowded places are now bucket list places, um, destinations that are not your typical go-tos are making their way for good reason onto those bucket list lists because of COVID, winter weather
Yeah.
situation, wanting to road trip different. So the travel trends have really changed all of those like typical travel.
Well, yeah, all of what we want out of life has really changed, right? We all got as horrible as the situation has been for us, and bad for businesses, and bad for personal, and people getting sick, and people losing loved ones. It's been a really bad situation, but it's also allowed us to just rethink what's important in our lives. And so I think the bucket list changes from consumption to experience. And how do I want, and I'm out of the house finally. How do I want to spend that time with my children, with my spouse, with my friends, with my family I haven't seen? So it becomes more about how do I want to spend my time versus I want to check something off and pop it on Instagram.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
But also, I think there's and we've seen this, we already saw the DMO and what DMOs are doing shifting. But I really love that I've been talking to some really forward thinking destinations over the last few weeks, and even since last week when we talked. And some destinations are, they rallied around their community, and of course they still do, and they rallied around like their local services. But then, as soon as it started looking like things were opening back up, they're back to only thinking about a certain segment that they may have had 5 years ago. But what I love is there's some really loving and forward thinking destinations who are not abandoning and even doubling down on their community, doubling down on those services that may not seem like traveler services. I think that's a long game shift.
Oh yeah. I don't think we can say it enough times. The
Mhm.
impact that COVID and the behavior shift will have on DMOs and our behaviors for a really long time.
Yeah.
The We always say it takes a village, it takes a community, it takes a partnership with all of your partners, because you do need those partners to help promote and encourage. And it's not just your partners, it's your community, it's your residents that live there, it's the people that call that place home, and they know that destination, they know the places to go, places to eat, hidden gems, they know all of those things. And so it's using your whole village, and not forgetting that you have that amazing asset and that rhythm that was such an important piece
Mhm.
for the last year, coming out of COVID for DMOs. We have to continue carrying that with us. We
Oh,
can't
yeah.
drop that, or pick that apart and use pieces of it as we move forward. We really have to carry that torch through, even if we open up and DMOs continue to go back to their strategies from 5 years ago. That piece of it that has been established with the community has to stay intact,
Yeah.
and that village has to stay strong.
It does. And you know what's really fun is I was, doing the Ohio Winery Conference a little earlier this week, and it's super interesting to see like a local services partnering with a normally tourist type of asset. Like, I heard some like you have dentists come out for like a pop-up event, and it's, how to make sure you don't have wine stains if you're a red wine drinker. I mean, it's kind of an educational, like you wouldn't think of that from a traveler perspective, but there's really creative ways that you can get local services working in that. And your traveler too is still your community. You got to dance with the one that brung you.
Is, and we keep talking about this too. This is another hot topic that I don't think we're going to put down for a while, is our your work from anywhere, or your person who doesn't really call, or your family who doesn't really call one particular place home base, or have roots in one place, where they do have
Yeah.
their go-to dentist and their go-to doctor and their go-to dry cleaner and their go-to this, that. The local services in the destinations they travel to frequently, or or maybe just they're always on the road, those become part of that experience. It is the dentist doing the pop-ups. It is, there's a lot of those intermingling now that is going to continue to surge.
Yeah, so I think it's really about awareness on that too, because even if you're not always on the road, we see that probably trends and seasons are going to change by the fact that people can work from home or work from anywhere. So as they are able to do that, I would want to know if I'm taking my kids, if I'm not a total nomad, but I'm taking my kids into a destination for, let's say, 2, 3, 4 weeks, what happens if there's, a broken bone, or
Right.
what happens, like, so their local services do matter from that.
Absolutely. I mean, you think about financial things, is my bank here? Can I actually go into a branch of my bank that I bank with here? I mean, there's little things like that that are starting to be thought about differently when you
Yeah.
travel. I think the local services partnering with the leisure aspect of the destination, the hotels partnering with the local services aspect of the destination. I mean, look at Texas this week as an example. Hotels opening their doors, and for the most part, hotels are full of local residents. They are people that live in that destination that needed a place to stay, a place to get
Especially in Texas right now.
in Texas. And so these are, I mean, these are people who can't get on the road. Conditions are terrible, but there are still restaurants that are coming out and going, "Hey, we'll deliver food.
Mhm.
Hey, you need your laundry done. We'll pick up your launder it and bring it back." I mean, this dynamic is crazy, because you've got hotels in the mix, you've got residents in those hotels looking for local services that they might not be normally looking for. So that dynamic pivot, and we always say pivot being like, this is like a universe, it's just like a word every day. Now that pivot is, there's a core to it. And the core
Mhm.
is keeping your partners intact, keeping your leisure partners talking to your local services, talking to your hotels, and in any situation that pops up, no matter what it is, there's a model that they can follow, a rhythm to that keeps them working together too.
Yeah, and I really think I like that you brought up pivot, because it makes me think of what I'm seeing happening sometimes with the destination mindset is it's like a rubber band they're hoping will snap back. But I think it's more like, like a diet, right? So people who think from a diet perspective, they go on a diet and they can't wait to get off the diet so they can have their damn cheeseburger. But really, it's more about like embracing more like a healthy lifestyle. Like, how is this a long-term thing? So instead of pivoting, I'm thinking you don't just embrace the generational, the situational change shift.
It's a lot. Everything that we're going through feels like it's more of like a lifestyle change. Like it's a lifestyle shift.
It is.
Not because we are looking at it from two perspectives. We're looking at it from the DMO perspective. So, there's a lot of shakeup going on. How we typically do things isn't as regimented as it used to be. But also from the consumer side of it, everything that happens to us that we go through changes our behavior in some way.
Yeah.
Like, I've had a great experience with someone this week because of the winter storm that I wouldn't have necessarily had to use or even had to reach out to. But because of that, one experience, the way that I think about using a certain service or using a certain whatever will be different the next time I plan travel, because I've got that, ingrained differently.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things that are happening are continuously weaving a different behavior for consumers, and DMOs have to continue to follow that weave. But I think, like, we continue going back to this common core being the partners and the destination. I mean, if you got that thing strong, then they're going to weather a lot of variables that we can't pinpoint.
Partners, but also I think why a lot of people, and it would be anybody, right? Managers, bosses, whatever. The reason that rubber band effect is so attractive is because you have been judged pre-COVID by a certain set of metrics, numbers. This is how you're judged by the job that you do. And as we all know, people in destination marketing, I mean, they're civil servants. They're not there for the money. They actually really care about what they're developing. So I think it's really, really important to make sure that your board is constantly educated on the fact that this is a moving situation and it's a new way of thinking. And if they're on board with that, then the metrics from 2018, 2017 can start to morph into the proper KPIs for you. And then once you know that your board's behind you, your commissioners are behind you, your relevancy is strong, your community is behind you, then you can really focus on the metrics that matter.
Absolutely. And then your metrics also that matter are constantly shifting in these times too. Those metrics that you didn't think about tracking a certain way, or even tracking a trend for, are now on the radar because of the shift in behavior. And it really, this whole rubber band effect, I think, that does seem attractive. There's kind of two lenses with it. There's a lens in the mode that we might, from a snap back situation, everything might be open again, right? In this particular place. Everything might feel the same from a on paper standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side of the lens, everyone that is doing business with those places or coming to those places, we're all different now.
It's a much different feeling, feeling versus thinking on all this.
Back, or we're not snapping back, as our behaviors are forever changed. They're
Mhm.
forever, down a different path. And that is not, and that is where the normalcy aspect is so important when we're thinking about strategies from 5 years ago. It's not necessarily what you have to work with in your destination. It is about who's coming and how are they different and why are they different.
So true. And on that metrics thing, and of course, data and data science is huge, and that's great. But there's something to be said there. I think the old saying goes, not everything that actually counts can be counted, and not everything that's counted actually counts. So this brings in the, like, sometimes you just need that woo woo, if you will, intuitive and feeling of what's going on with people, and not always a one, a zero, because we're so tired of also being reduced to ones and zeros. What's the feeling that's going on out there?
That's the sentiment that we continue to see coming out is so important right now. And it's not a numbers game. It's a general feeling, a general consensus type of analysis that is crucial to continue to see where are we going as a collective, and our audiences are different, and how we segment people are different,
Yeah.
and all different audiences is very different, and how they travel, most importantly, is very different now. So with all those variables being so different, I think the sentiment reports and those that have a collective analysis across a number of types of people and markets is going to be, it's going to rise above that. Here's my numbers. Here's how we, here's our spike in this, and our, it's not as,
That's
doesn't.
and that's why I love the sentiment and the voluntary surveying going on right now, especially, a lot of people have seen the kind of data that's being captured by a lot of the platforms that we use, but it's really how you use that data. So I think it's really important to continue that relationship and get sentiments and get voluntary information to find out what people are feeling and then, advertise and market appropriately in an ethical way.
Right.
Hashtag woo woo.
Hashtag woo.
It's a, we are in a more of a feeling. I mean, we're just overall, it's shifted us in more of a feeling society.
Well, because I think we all rely on each other's feelings a lot more than we used to.
Mm-hmm.
Hashtag mood. My mood affects your mood affects my neighbor's mood affects, I mean, we are leaning more on each other as a society to get through a lot of the tough times.
Yeah.
And comes the crossover of emotions. You do have a lot of feeling weaved into a lot of decision making.
Mm-hmm.
There's, the last year, just to be frank, I think a lot of people had wake up calls like,
This is what really matters.
this is what matters. This is what matters. This is what is important to me. This is what truly matters. I got to be thinking about these things. My priorities are ass backwards, however you want to describe it.
Yeah,
It's just a different time now. And that is fully an emotional, that's all emotional in your decision making.
totally agree. I think it is. And I want to go back to that point of, you know, it does take a village. It's important to, really pull that together from your neighbors, your community, your services, your tourism services, your neighbor down the road who may have been competition before. It's smart to pull those together and really respond to the mood more than responding to, you know, shoving a certain demographic or geographic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also just the from a response standpoint, it's a very difficult thing to tiptoe around when you're a DMO when it comes to sensitivities to certain things,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's local, national, political, whatever it is. There's a lot of tiptoeing that, I mean, it's just the nature of the types of organizations and what they're responsible for ultimately.
Yeah.
But in the same vein, we're all people communicating with people
Mm-hmm.
who all have emotions to certain things. And I think that truly changes the game to what we would consider to be appropriate or inappropriate, resourceful or not. There's all of those other caveats to that we have to start thinking about, which makes a huge difference to the types of media that you run, the types of messages you put out there, the types of social media. A great example of this is sharing a one story situation. Like if you see someone who's done something really impactful for your community, or you see, someone who's making a difference and you tell about their particular story, that ignites people differently now. That can turn into a thread of thousands of comments
Oh,
from
yeah.
people who are actually talking about a similar experience, something that they saw. So, there are little things now that we might have been as a collective industry afraid to really kind of share, or or I don't know, be sensitive about for whatever reason. But those are the things
But
that
those have changed.
it's changed, and that's what people want to
Yeah.
see. They want to see the rallying around. They want to see the community. They want to see the hospitality aspect. They want to see all of these. They want to see the feel goods. That is still going to be the theme of collectively, no matter if it's a winter storm, no matter if we see any rise this summer from COVID, whatever ends up happening, that's going to be the theme.
And we should promote that. I mean, we can create our own good news because what the shortest distance between two people is a story. People want to hear that story, whether they're a local and that's their neighbor, or whether it's somebody who's considering a destination or a meeting planner considering something. Those local stories are here to stay. And I think it's really important because we can create our good news, get out of crisis management. What are our optics? Let's overly, shift this story type of mode to, okay, this may be going on. What's the good going on in here? And I love the one that just showed up about the mayor in Texas, not the one who resigned, but the one who's running around and, just randomly helping his citizens.
Yes.
There's a lots of stories, not just about people in authority like a mayor, but all the way down. And I think that is also another way to shift perceptions of why you consider one place or another.
Absolutely. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter on what scale your partners are. As a
Mhm.
DO, we tend to focus, they tend to focus, and we end up piggybacking on things like, your assets, your go-tos, the
Yeah.
tops in the destination, your restaurants and those big attractions and those types of things. And that has all shifted. Your mom and pops, your family-owned businesses, your local services, those feel good stories from some of those guys that you would have never 2 years ago really put in your radar. That is what people want to see. And actually, that's what truly brings people into your destination. That
Mhm.
feeling of, community, hospitality,
Well,
that
you
charm.
feel familiar, right? It feels family like. And
Yeah.
that's really interesting because even before all of this, that's the shift that happened with celebrities. Like, when you and I grew up, celebrities were like this untouchable, you know, kings and queens of whatever. Now they got on social media, people feel like there's a personal relationship there. So, same thing with, different businesses. Depending on how you do your social media, people can already feel familiar. Like, I already know this. I'm just going to go see a friend.
Yeah. And that checks the box. It checks the box for so many things when you're thinking about partnering up and truly getting back to
Yeah.
the theme of this being the village. Those good stories, those wins, those feel goods that are shared by the businesses. That's an easy share from a DMO. That's an easy story to tell. Just resharing that, putting some feeling behind it, that helps the local businesses. That will absolutely increase engagement for the DMO. It will absolutely bring people a different light for the destination and truly hit people differently. And that's what we really should be thinking about, is how do we not just motivate someone to travel there or motivate someone to spend time there, but how do we hit them differently? How do we impact them
Yeah.
differently?
And even for the tier one or larger destinations, I think marketing humility is a good pill to take. Like even when you're doing big meetings, huge citywide meetings, corporate tier one kind of leisure destinations, I think that some marketing humility also will, broaden that and tighten that relationship. So I love the fact that, for everyone, it's just about visiting an old friend.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in every place that, in every destination, no matter how big or small, there are people in that destination that keep it going. And it's the people, the business owners, the frontline workers,
Mhm.
you know, um, the hotel cleaning staff. There are people that make that destination spin possible. Like there are things that literally can,
Oh,
people
yeah.
in those places that can halt things, bring things to a halt that don't typically get recognized, but let's recognize them. Let's bring them into the forefront.
Yeah.
Let's put light on those in the destination, and also lift your partners up in that same vein. And that is what we mean by being that core to your community, bringing that into the fold, continuing to promote those things, and continuing to encourage partners to work together, use the assets and use the stories and use each other's lift to continue to lift, and not let that fall because we think we're snapping back, or something, shift is over and now we're headed down a different path. We're never going to be down a straight and narrow ever again in this industry.
I don't think we're going to see it, not even just never again in this century. I don't think we're going to see a shift back in this lifetime. And I kind of hope that's the case, that we're shifting to a more love thy neighbor, inclusive society. So I
Mhm.
think we see an overall shift. And that really does kind of take us to our theme of it takes a village. And I'm super, super enthusiastic about the things that we're seeing, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, like I told you this morning, you sometimes you wake up in a mood, right? You're just like, like it's been a long week. It's been a long week. I didn't have Wi-Fi for a lot of days, and I'm super behind. You have this overwhelming feeling, when you get up sometimes, of you're just like, oh, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But I woke up and instead of starting my day with like a CNN update, local news. Okay, what's going on? what's happening that I just need to know. I started with like feel good stuff. I'm like, okay, what's good out there? Let me hear some stories. Let me like watch a few videos on the feel good. And it totally changed my mood for the entire day, no matter what else is going on. Those things and the people putting those things out, VMOs, small businesses, your local chambers,
Mm-hmm.
your
Yeah,
group,
I love it.
Facebook groups. If you're not in Facebook groups right now, engaging in those groups, sharing those stories, encouraging others to share those stories as a destination marketing organization, you are
Mm-hmm.
not involved with a huge chunk of social media. You
That's
are
so true.
living on the edge of social media and you are not in social media if you're not in those
You're in a
groups.
push versus pull kind of environment. You're not really truly social listening either.
No, that's where the conversations are happening. That's where the recommendations are happening. That's where
Yeah.
you sentiment for how people feel about certain topics. I mean, there is a ton, and I know it's difficult from a DMO perspective because you can't be in there as the DMO. You got to bring your personal self in. But we are all, from a marketing standpoint, we're used to that by now. We are
Well, it's
marketers.
more about authenticity too. I mean, who you are as a person needs to reflect in who you are in the business you represent. I don't think there's any more of that two-faced, kind of living.
No, absolutely not. There's so much crossover between work and life. You know, you are your brand for the most part, the brand you work for, the brand you represent. I mean, people know where you work, they know what you do for a living. Just be genuine, be authentic. Don't try to be a salesperson when you're not a salesperson. And if you are a salesperson, definitely don't be a salesperson. And just be authentic and just go with the flow. And a
Mhm.
lot of times I honestly, I make recommendations that I feel absolutely 100% authentic, even if it is a client or somewhere that a friend owns or something. I
Yeah.
100% like, you're going to have a great experience. I've been there, I've done that. They're actually a client of mine. And even if they weren't a client of mine, I'd still recommend it. Go do it. And if, as long as you're approaching it with that aspect, I think everyone in the DMO, we talk about being a village, your employees, I don't care if you're 2 people or you're 200 people, everybody in that DMO needs to be working for that DMO with their personal brand. They need to be an advocate.
Mhm.
They need to be, it's no longer a 9 to 5, people. It's an all the time advocacy for that destination.
It is. And if you don't believe in it, then you shouldn't, then you need to find something else to do.
Believe in, or go find something that you're truly passionate about, because the number one thing when it comes to authenticity is truly being passionate and truly loving what you are talking about first and foremost, because if you
Mhm.
don't, that's going to come across in less than 2 seconds. You're going to
It
immediately.
is. And, outside of schematics or whatever, when people buy, they don't buy companies, they buy people. They're going to buy the people they're connected to. So, regardless of how you put that out there, even from a meeting planner perspective, once you've checked those boxes of having the right assets, then it's going to be about what person is going to help me achieve my goals. What's that person, not even the asset. So, even from a DMO meeting standpoint, it does come down to personal authenticity.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so much so.
Well, I love that. I think we had a lot of really good nuggets and like continuing. I feel like our episodes are now this stream of consciousness.
They are. It's just kind of where we're, again, it's like we're driven by emotion. It's like, what are we emotionally attached to this week? What has emotionally changed us this week? Where are we hashed in our hashtag mood situation?
I love it. And I think next week we're going to talk about co op, right? We're going to talk about good, bad, ugly.
Yeah, we definitely want to continue that conversation of it takes a village. And sometimes when we talk about it takes a village from a lot of aspects. It takes a village from resources. It takes a village from financial aspect. It takes a village from planning and strategy. It takes a village from a consistency. And that's where we get into co-op. We're
Yeah.
seeing so many more destinations going, help us with co-op. How do we ask our partners for a little bit to make a lot to make this happen?
Mm-hmm.
We want to dive into that a lot more, give some tips, some thoughts,
Yeah.
some what's happened well, what we've seen gone wrong. We'll spill some tea on partners and vendors that you absolutely do not want to go into co-op with unless you just like flushing money down the toilet. But yeah, I think that's a good segue from our It Takes a Village theme.
Yeah, we'll take our village conversation to the village co-op conversation next week, and hope everybody stays safe and warm and keep planning to travel.
Absolutely.